Okay, reading log B. First of all, this reading log is the second in a three-part series of reading logs and similar exercises that you can find the overall explanation for back in Project 2, the video there called Reading Logs and Reading Log A. That's where I described the whole process and then also introduced the Reading Log A, the one that you've already done in the past. Now you've graduated from Reading Log A and we're moving on to Reading Log B, which is not particularly more difficult, I would say, but does require a little more concentration and sustained effort. The questions are the same kinds of things you'll see, but they ask you to do it in a more focused way and a little bit more of it. We're going to do these reading logs a couple of times, actually maybe three, before the training wheels come off and we move on to the last process, the last step in the process, where I show you how I think it's best to use similar kinds of observations that you find on the reading logs in freer annotations and marginal notes that you'll put directly on the works that you use. More on that later. For now, let me show you how reading log B is supposed to work. I'm going to share my screen with you so we can take a look at it together. There we go. And if I'm not mistaken, you ought to be able to see this right now. But it's not giving me the same indication I usually have about that. So, oh yeah, it is. Okay, we're good. Yes. All right. So, sorry about that. So yeah, here's reading log B. You can see, the first thing to see about it is that it is divided into three parts, which here are called segments. Segment 1, segment 2, and segment 3. All three of the segments have identical questions. So in other words, each thing that you're asked to do here, you're going to do 3 times, each one of them on a different segment of the overall essay. So for example, if I were doing the dumpster diving essay, which in this case happens to be the first one that you're asked to do using reading log B, what you should do before you start is divide that rather lengthy essay into 3 sections. Now, it doesn't really matter how long those sections are or where you make that division. Sometimes there are natural divisions in the text, parts that have independent titles or segments that are numbered. In this case of dumpster diving, there are a couple of natural divisions where Lars Einar shifts directions just a little bit, and it might make sense for you to draw the lines there. But like I said, it doesn't matter. You can divide the text into whatever 3 segments make sense for your reading process. Then you start by reading the first section of the 3 that you just made, and while doing so, apply the questions that you see here, these reading strategies. Then when you get to the second segment, you'll do the same thing, this time following through with the questions listed in segment 2, a repeat of the ones in segment 1, and then you do that a third time as well. Okay, now I want to walk you through the various question types here so that you have a pretty clear idea of what you're asked to do. Remember, our aim here is not perfection. Ultimately, the dream is that you collect ideas that you can use later. Now, it's a little artificial in this case because you're not using Dumpster Diver on Dumpster Diving by Lars Einar as a resource for a research essay. Later, when you're using actual sources, like in the civil disobedience essay, using a reading log can help you leave breadcrumbs for yourself so you can find your way back to the main ideas that you're going to want to incorporate into your own work. For now, though, it's a practice run, and the idea is that you don't have to be perfect. Just do your best to collect something significant with each question that you encounter. The first one is this. Write a 2-sentence summary. So for the segment of of segment 1 of the text, the first third of it, embrace this puzzle of trying to say the gist of that thing in exactly 2 sentences. I want it to be at least 2 sentences long, but I don't want it to be more than 2 sentences. And that's kind of a writing trick that's not altogether unlike working to say complicated things in concise ways. So embrace that practice. Do your best to say it economically, even though it's large and complex. Then write 2 questions directly answered by the text. This is easy in a way. It's a matter of asking a question that a reader could read directly through the text and find a direct answer to. So you might say like, when did Lars Einar start dumpster diving. Which happened first, him losing his home or him not having enough food? Something like that, right? And that's the sort of thing that a reader doesn't have to think hard about. They simply have to locate the answer. I want you to ask 2 questions like that. By the way, for none of these where there are questions, you don't have to do, for none of these do you have to actually answer the questions. Here, all you have to do is float the question, and that's sufficient for our purposes. The same thing goes for the next one. This one is a slightly more complicated variety of question, an interpretive question, one that requires connecting the dots. One, we might say, that requires an audience, the person reading the question, to put 2 and 2 together in order to figure it out. Ask them to reason a little bit about something. An example of this for the Lars Einar essay might be, why did Lars Einar begin dumpster diving the first time, right? It probably doesn't say that outright, but an audience could read and infer from that text what it is that answers the question. So that's an interpretive question. Then finally, this is the one I care the most about. This is where you ask a synthesis question. Now, on our earlier reading logs, you guys have practiced synthesis by writing short paragraphs of 5 sentences explaining how the text you just read connects with some idea you've encountered in some other context, something you read about or learned about elsewhere. On earlier ones, for example, we were able to connect Frederick Douglass with earlier readings in the class, like the one by Malcolm X. That's what you're asked to do here, but in a way, it's easier because instead of writing it all out, you can simply make the connection by asking the question. A good way to put this might be, does Lars Einar's experience of homelessness connect with the economic matters of homelessness that I read about in my economics class? Something like that, right? Next, I want you to clarify 2 things. This first one, I want you to choose a particular term or phrase in the text and write out in your own words in 2 sentences what that term means in the particular way it's applied in that text. We're not looking for definitions here, and we're also not looking for you to find terms that you don't already know. It might be that it's a term you don't already know, and it might be that you looked up that term. But above all, what we're looking for may be terms you're already familiar with, but which are being used in a significant or central way or a unique way in the text here. So write down some phrase or term, and then explain how it's being applied here in at least 2 sentences. Next thing is to do the same kind of paraphrasing and practice that we did on reading log A. Here's where you take a phrase that Lars Einar wrote or that the author wrote, and you restate that in the same, in your own terms. So you say again the same thing that the author just said, but entirely with words of your own origination. So that is how you do it. Then you do it a second time and a third time, and I think you'll find that you retain more from that reading than you're used to retaining from reading in general. This is a secret of college reading. The aim is not to try to remember every single thing that you read. That's not what advanced readers do. And I find that lots of beginning students feel like their reading experience is unsuccessful because they don't remember everything that they read. They might get to the end of a lengthy text and say, well, I did it, but what was the point? Because I can't remember all that anyway, right? As it happens, what advanced readers do is collect specific things, and in particular, specific things that they're looking for in a larger research project. And that's what this reading log is supposed to support you in doing. Collecting not just anything, but also advanced sorts of things that are the kinds of things that you'll be able to use in your own research and projects later. All right, now, don't worry. If this is clunky the first time, it's going to be okay. I'm a pretty flexible grader about these kinds of assignments. But also, I'm open for questions. Those of you who meet with me regularly during the week between 12:30 and 2 or at other scheduled times, know that I'd be more than happy to take any question you have about this sort of thing. So make sure that you reach out either during my Zoom drop-in hours or by email so that I can answer any questions that you have. Okay, happy reading.